You're listening to Rally DNA.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 200.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rally DNA. I'm Killian Cronin, and joining me as ever is the Gravel Crew's Jamie Arkle. Our guest this week, the first co-driver we have on the podcast, is Mr. Alex Gelsomino, all the way from the States. So thanks for giving us the time, Alex. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, how are you guys? Thanks for having me, and hello to all your listeners.
So, Alex, you're best known, of course, as a co-driver to a certain Kenneth Block, but you're a dyed-in-the-wool rally fan like the pair of us. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your formative experiences and how you came to be interested in the sport?
Well, it's actually a pretty simple story because I was born and raised and come from a country where rallying is a big sport, especially it's not just Italy, but southern Italy, where I'm from. Sicily is the capital, of some of the best, events in the world, especially the Targa Florio, which was an event that growing up in the 80s was as round of the World Sports Car Championship, and then it became a rally. So yeah, I remember growing up as a kid and going with my Vespa scooters and with my mates, to watch events like hill climbs and rallies, and that's how the passion started. Then to get involved as a competitor was actually pretty easy because in Italy, especially in countries that have a strong car and rallying and racing background, you have teams that are actually running programs. In my case, was a local team that had a co-driver school, and I went to that for a few days, learned how to be a co-driver. And the purpose why they have those schools is because they have so many members and so many new drivers that are always looking for co-drivers, and that's how I started. After a couple of weeks after I did the co-driver school, I was introduced to a driver. I did my first rally. I was only like 19 years old, and the rest is history. Again, it's a place in the world where there is a lot of events, there is a lot of rallies, so it was easy to progress, do event after event, and then I eventually moved to the US and started all over again here.
It's great that there's such programs available like that. Because I remember when I decided I wanted to do some co-driving, and it was kind of like, how do I even begin to find out about this? So, I joined the motor club, and then my first event, I was just basically asking people in the service park how to fill out time cards. So it's great to see that there's such an easy route in places to get people started, because it's not always the easiest to actually get involved in motorsport for a lot of people. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is really cool. And look, we all know our sport is a fairly complicated sport. It is not like you just go to a circuit, you unload your motorbike or your truck car and you start doing laps. There is so much involved. So it is complicated. And that's something also that we sort of started integrating and doing here in the US, which is a fairly new country when it comes to our sport. We do a similar thing that I did when I was a teenager. We have co-driver schools, and after the students that do that, we try to introduce them to drivers that are looking for long or short terms, co-drivers, and there is right now a lot of new competitors in the US and North America because of that. So it's a system that works. You just need to have it going, and when you get it going, then it attracts even more competitors and more new people into the sport, because the mates of the people that we train now are interested, the boyfriends, the girlfriends, and everything. So it becomes a bit of a snowball.
At the risk of jumping ahead a little bit too far, do you feel the momentum building in terms of the appreciation and understanding of rallying as a sport on that side of the Atlantic? Because the last 20 years have seen such massive changes in that respect. It seems to have gone from strength to strength and having very little profile to, well, certainly a much larger one.
Yeah, I definitely do. Right now, we're seeing record entries. Our events, the event next year, the event next week has got almost 100 entries, and I believe it's got a wait list at this point. So it is strong, and there is reasons why it is strong. I think one of the reasons. Look, the problem here in North America, as you guys know, was always to introduce the sport and make the Americans understand what rallying is all about. We from Europe, we understand it because, like we said a moment ago, we were introduced from a young age, so it's been indoctrinated in our minds, right? But here it's different, and the fact that social media and internet have become so strong in the last, I would say, 10 years and keep becoming stronger and stronger, and the content is available to the American public or the American enthusiasts just in the palm of their hand from their smartphone. That has been the biggest contribution in my opinion. Like you see something that is cool like rallying, and then a search takes you to endless videos and opportunities to understand what this sport is all about. That, in my opinion, has been the reason why the sport is becoming popular. You have brand new competitors coming to the sport. You have a lot of new cars. I mean, we go to events right now in North America. You look around, I don't know, 3/4 of the people, they're all new competitors.
I think you're completely right in as much as taking it for granted in terms of the innate understanding of rallying that certainly a lot of petrol-head Europeans have, and it's also easy for people like ourselves who are quite who are indoctrinated at an early age to take it for granted about some of its more complex elements. You said earlier, compared to racing, circuit racing is simple, whereas the variables involved in rallying are just so manifold that getting a grasp of it can take a while, especially for a culture not as steeped in it as we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And it's a positive thing, because it's a sport we love. We like to see it healthy, but also we like it to see growing in countries like US, Australia, New Zealand, Caribbeans, this side of the world, which a sport doesn't have really a history like it does in Ireland, Europe, France, Italy, and the rest of European countries where the sport was born.
Do you think part of the challenge in the States in trying to grow the sport is just the sheer size of the country makes a lot of events inaccessible to people? Because in Europe, we've so many regional championships. It's no matter where you live in the country, it's really easy to get to a rally if you're a fan. Be it living in the UK, Ireland, France, Italy, wherever, there's going to be some rallying on close by at some point. The States is just vast. So do you think that's part of the challenge in making it grow and making it more accessible?
Yeah, there will always be a big challenge in a country like the US, and there is really no an answer how to fix. It's a big country, the distances are massive. You could say the same thing about Australia, and it's a country because my wife is Australian. I spend a lot of time there. I compete there and everything. But Australia has done a good job creating a better regional scene. So if you are a competitor that are on a budget or have time restrictions and can't take so many days to do a national events, which will go from New South Wales to Victoria to the other side of Australia, like Perth in Western Australia, then you can do very well organized regional and state series in New South Wales, in Queensland and Victoria. So they've done a really good job in Australia, which has a size comparable to the US. Here in the US, we struggle with that. We're missing the regional scene for some reason that I'm not entirely sure about it. And even the smaller competitors are focusing more on national events, which that means longer distances. I mean, even a big team like Hoonigan Racing, or when we work with Subaru USA, when you look at the travel costs are some of the biggest expenses of our team. Traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast, 3-4 days of towing, with now the costs of gas and diesel, it's even more. So that is a bit of a problem here, and I wish there was a bigger scene as far as regional. There are some regions here that, you know, like the Pacific Northwest, and that's about it, I guess. You know, where you have competitors that stick to their area, but it could be better. And I guess it's part of the game of being a brand new country when it comes to a sport like ours.
I suppose the sheer size of the USA could cut both ways in terms of, yes, it's an issue in terms of growing the sport's initial popularity, but if and when it does click, then the sheer variety of surfaces and environments that America offers must be, you know, I mean, there's huge potential there for unique rallies and things like that.
Absolutely. I think, to me, that is the highlight of the American Championship. The fact that you have at the moment nine national rounds, and all 9 of them are all different from each other. You know what I mean? You got fast, you got technical, you got different surfaces. We have competitors that come from overseas and compete in our national series. And one of the most recent one I spoke to is Tom Williams, that comes from England. And he said to me, it's amazing how each single event is so different. It makes it really enjoyable. So that is the highlight of our series, in my opinion. And the fact that the environments are different, the stages are different. Yeah, so it's just very, very cool.
To take a little step back, maybe in time again, when you did get involved in co-driving, what was the decision to go down that particular route? What attracted you to that discipline and part of that side of the car, as it were?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. The decision was strictly budget. You know, you have this 19-year-old that wants to get involved in this sport, and I said to myself, I'm going to do 2-3 events as a co-driver, and then I'll ask my dad if we can buy a rally car. Of course, that never happened. You know, I did ask, but it never happened that he bought a rally car for me. So I stuck to that because the sport is just so cool. I wanted to be involved, and back then I was so young, and I think I was progressing quite well. And there was no internet, there was no email back then, or no text messages. So my parents, we were getting phone calls at home of drivers that were interested in having me co-drive. So I said to myself, after only 5 or 6 events, I said, well, this can lead me to be part of this sport in a consistent level and grow within the sport. Those were the early 90s. So we Italians, we had the example of the Lancia team, which was dominating and winning world championships. So every 19-year-old kid, just like me, had the dream. We were following what was happening in the world championship, and with a big effort both in European, national, and world championship with the Lancia team and the Abarth team. So we had no, I don't want to say a goal to follow, but the example was there that we as Italians could do well in our sport, and we were all excited about it. Then, you know, the team folded after a few years, but I was already well established into the sport, and then, you know, I moved to the US, and that's a different story. But it was great to have that jump start in Italy, and paid off a lot when I then moved to the US and started competing here.
On the subject of moving to the US, I mean, there must have been a point where you presumably got off a plane, you know, sorted your life out, and then thought, right, how do I continue doing this thing that's an integral part of my life and a key hobby in a country that has very little infrastructure?
Yeah.
How on earth did you even begin to go about continuing?
I had to look for it. I moved from Italy to the US. I moved to Florida because work. I found work there. I was working for a restaurant around the Walt Disney area, so it was good work. It was, you know, a good area where to live. But then after only a year and a half, I was living there. I was like, I do miss the sport that, you know, I was doing in Italy, and I want to do more. I need to find more. And look, it goes back to when I was even younger. I remember in Italy getting like, there was a newsstand. They used to get American magazines, right? And I used to get American automotive publications like Motor Trend and Car and Driver and things like that. I'm just a kid, you know, I'm 10, 12 years old. And I'm reading about someone like John Buffum and Rod Midland. And those two guys are battling for the American championship in factory cars, factory Mazda, factory Audi. John is with a Group B Audi, ex-Michel Mouton. So I'm reading this magazine, I'm looking at these pictures, and they look beautiful. They're beautiful stages and everything. So I knew there was a scene, right? So here I am now, moved to the US. I'm learning the language. I'm getting myself established in my new country. And then I was like, okay, I need to find out more about rallying. And at that point, there was a good, strong state championship in California. It was the California Rally Series. Many events, every season, and many competitors. Was really strong. We're talking about 25 years ago. So I said to my wife back then, okay, we need to move to California. I think there is better opportunities there. I didn't really say the reason. And so I moved to California, established myself there, in Los Angeles and all that. And then I started seeking, and okay, there is the next event of the California Championship in a few weeks, just north of Los Angeles. I go and investigate there, and I see there is a strong field. Okay, I'm going to get myself, my name out there, and I want to compete there. And the following round after that was a round in Arizona, Prescott, Arizona, beautiful event. And I competed there, and it was my first round in America. Look, I can't, memory doesn't serve me well, but I think it might have been somewhere around 2000, 1999 or 2000 when I did that event. Yeah. But there was to answer your question, there was a plan in place that there was always, for me I got to get back in a rally car because I'd done it 3-4 years in Italy. Now I miss it. I got to find it here, whatever it is.
It's hard to stop rallying for sure.
It is. It's a very good point. It's so addictive. I rarely meet a person or a driver that comes to our sport and then is gone completely. They quits. Maybe they take some time off. They build a family, build a business, this and that. But eventually they all come back. When you think, at least here in the US, I very rarely think of a driver, oh, that guy's gone. I haven't heard from him in years. They eventually come back. It's such an addictive sport, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you started rallying in '99 in America then with Steve Westwood. Take us back. So you're in a golf at the time, but what the machinery, I think, in the American Championships is what really has evolved a lot over the last few years. So at that time, what is the classes? What are the competitive classes in the American Championship then? What's at the top of the field at that point? And then right the way down, what are the competitive cars then?
Well, the first thing that I notice is that they are competing here with very loose regulations, which in one way is a really good thing. There is a lot of people that are building their cars in their garage, and they're building their own cars, which where I came from Italy, that was quite different, because in Italy, back when I was competing there, the one make series were really the big thing, the Peugeot, Renault, and Fiat had, you would buy the car at the dealership, and you would have the opportunity to buy a rally kit, which would include the cage, the seats, and everything that came to it. And you would take it to a professional shop, and they would build it for you, and they would assist you during the event. It was more like a customer shop. But here, and the first thing I noticed is the people are building their cars in their own sheds, and they're putting in their own trailer, with their pickup trucks, towing it to the events. So I noticed that at the lower class, and at the top class, you still have now John Buffum, which is running the Hyundai team, and he's winning. His drivers are winning events after event. He's the only factory team. So the first impression was rally feels easier to get into here. There is a lot of people that are doing on a very low budget, used tires, again, car built in their own shed. That's something I wasn't used to. So they gave me even more of a push of saying to myself, this is great because I can do it even easier. But then they created another problem, which was taking the time off. And there is a different story for that, which I'll tell you in a minute, I guess.
Would you say that the sort of level of professionalism in the American rally scene expanded in the noughties as your career in America got into full swing?
Yeah, good question. I witnessed that. As soon as I got here, it wasn't quite there. But for some reason, I got here at the right place at the right time. And after a couple of years, you start seeing this progression of, and obviously we are in the late 90s, early 2000s. The economy is strong. The stock market is strong. People that own businesses are doing well. There is a big influence of Irish competitors from the Northeast. You know, they're based in New York, Boston, and everything. Those guys are not messing around. They understand the sport. They're building proper cars. They're building, you know, good Evos, good, you know, Subarus and things like that. And then you have the involvement of Subaru of America, which then creates the involvement of Mitsubishi. The product that they're selling, you know, Evos, you know, STIs is hot, is brand new in the US market. It needs to be marketed somewhere. The only way you can market this product is through rallying. So yes, 2 years after I started competing, you start seeing this massive change. You start seeing the introduction of professional team and professional drivers. And that's when I find myself with a little bit more of an experience compared to the average American co-driver, because I come from Europe, which is, you know, I cut my teeth in the one-make series in Italy, which are tough. You know, you're finishing 15, 20 kilometer stages, you know, separated by a handful of seconds. So I already understand the sport. And when it comes to jump into the next level of cars, into the open class cars and into the faster cars and the better rides, my name is the one that, lucky for me, gets noticed the first. So yeah, it was good to be there at the right time.
And for those, I suppose there are probably people listening who maybe don't have quite the best understanding of the classes in America. So what separates the open class, say, from a guy in a Group N Mitsubishi? What's the differences there? What is the open class?
Yeah, well, the open class is basically that. You don't really have restrictions. They used to, actually, when I started, there used to be a restrictor for the turbo was 40 millimeter. Those cars were extremely powerful and extremely dangerous, I would say, because you were racing with 450, 500 horsepower Evos and Subarus, and back then American drivers weren't used to writing their own notes. There was still some limitations with the recce, so it was a recipe for disaster. And we had some big accidents, and eventually the sanctioning body changed the restrictor size to a smaller size. But to answer your question, an open class is a car that basically has got very little limitation aside from safety regulations. You know, they are dictated by engine displacement, of course, you know, and nowadays, because we're racing cars, the top 4 or 5 are racing cars that have substantial aerodynamic devices, you know, and things like that there is some sort of limitations for that. But other than that, especially when I started here, open class meant prototypes. That's the only way I can describe it. You know, there was no weight limits, you know, and there was whatever you can bring and your budget allows, you race it. And it was interesting.
That sounds wild, like
it was
rally,
wild, yeah.
Wild West style stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, 40 millimeter restrictors, that's something else. Like, yeah.
Why even bother?
Yeah.
Exactly.
What would you find are the other differences that separates the American championships from those in Europe? If I, as a European competitor, was to turn up to an event in the States tomorrow, what are the things that would stand out to me in terms of the organization, the recce, or anything else?
When we talk about today, the differences are minimal. Actually, when we're talking about 20 years ago, the way the sport was evolving here was we were going from blind events, just like the RAC used to be in the World Championship. We're going from that to organizer-provided notes, and then became organizer-provided notes with one pass of recce, and then it became 2 passes of recce. And now I guess we're going to the other extreme because we have open recce. So we have a day allowed for a reconnaissance, let's say next week. And I already prepared my recce schedule. And I know that from 7 in the morning to 8:30 p.m. when recce closes, I'll be able to squeeze 3 passes on most of the stages. So you're taking advantage of that, which in some ways makes you actually a little safer, because you have one extra opportunity to check your notes, and it's good for the newer competitors. So that was the evolution as far as the recce goes. As far as differences between US and European events, you get to an event right now in the US, you'll have the same procedures. You'll have regroups. You'll have ceremonial starts and everything. So you barely see a difference. Okay, we're still talking about a country where the sport isn't, and it's probably never going to be as big as Ireland, France, Italy, Spain. These countries invented our sport. But still, you get to a hairpin or you get to a junction here in North America right now, there is 1,500 spectators. That's pretty cool, to see in a country that doesn't have the history that those countries just mentioned have. So, yeah, you start an event in North America. You come from Europe and come and do an event here in North America. You start the event, you won't see many differences at this point. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of a shame in a way, because it's the theme of ever increasing homogenization of rallying. You've seen it for the last 30 years on every level from the WRC downwards, and I guess it's kind of a necessary thing, because to package the sport and for it to continue succeeding, you need that. But the downside is some of the sort of more unique elements from different corners of the world have been watered down to a degree.
Yeah, it's true. At the same time, the European system of running the rallies is the safest, is the best. So it's something that is a well-oiled machine. Was going to happen at some point. The U.S. organizer, the U.S. sanctioning bodies were going to absorb as much procedures as they could from that side of the world. So for me, it's better, because safety is always our main concern. We're running trackers on the rally car, trackers on the recce and everything. We're continuously monitored. To me, that's a good direction to do it, because let me tell you, it's a big country, and some areas where we compete here in America are quite remote. Mm-hmm. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where there is an emergency and there is minutes before you see someone else. At least you have a nice tracker and everything. You got radio communications and everything. So I'm happy that we've gone the direction that Europe is, and hopefully we keep doing even more. So it's just safety first.
Can't argue with that.
So over the next few years, then, kind of the early noughties, you found yourself in a variety of cars with a few pretty regular drivers, Ep.6s, an Audi Coupe AS2, which is an interesting rally car. That's something you see quite a lot. And you even found yourself back in Europe for an event in Wales in 2002. Is that correct, in the Subaru?
Correct. Yeah, that was my first event in Europe in many, many years. So I was competing for this driver that a lot of disposable income, and it was like, okay, well, let's keep progressing, let's keep learning. So we were competing with a group and Impreza here in the American Championship, and we had the opportunity to rent a car and do the round of the British Championship. It was Rally of Wales, but it wasn't the WRC round. Back then it was around of the British Championship, and that for me, it was something that I always looked for, and I continue to look for, because what I do with the job that we do as co-drivers, let's keep in mind, gentlemen, the best co-drivers are the one with the most experience. Yeah, so you rarely see an excellent co-driver that is only 20, 21, 23-year-old. The best co-drivers are 50, 55, and so on. Because unlike a driver where sheer talent is pretty much the only thing, together with a bit of brains, for a co-driver, experience is the most important thing. So when there is an opportunity, like a couple years ago, I did a French championship with an American driver, and she is not the fastest driver in the world, but to me it was a great opportunity to go and do a national championship in a place like France that gave me so much experience. Even if I had already done nearly 300 rallies, I wanted that in my resume, and it's something that at the end of the day always pays off. So that was the beginning of my stint as international events, and then obviously met with Ken, and then ended up doing world championship events and all that. And that's so good for a co-driver. Getting out and gaining experience, especially international experience, is very, very good.
And in the same year, you also did an event that's really on my bucket list to go and spectate at some point, Pikes Peak hill climb. That must be sensational to be a part of, or just even to watch, I imagine.
Yeah, it's one of the cathedrals of motorsport in the world. You got Monte Carlo, you got Donegal, you got Pikes Peak and places like that. These are places that not only you want to be there and witness it, but if you get the opportunity to compete on those, again, it's a massive achievement. Yeah, we did that for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. It was around the American Championship, actually. I personally enjoyed going there, but it wasn't a true rally. It was a hill climb. So we saw it as a different thing. Great experience. I'm happy it's not in the championship anymore, because it's a place where prototypes and now electric vehicles dominate, But it was, I haven't been there in many years. This year is the 100th anniversary. I may just go to spectate, and see it.
And presumably this brings us fairly closely to the beginning of your relationship working with Ken. How did that come about, if you don't mind me asking?
It's actually an interesting story. A very interesting story. I had a deal for that year, 2005, with a driver. Good deal, open class Subaru and everything. It was sorted. We haven't done the first round yet. So Ken is looking to get into the sport, and he's contacting Vermont Sports Car, which is a team that now runs Subaru Motorsport USA, because his good mate Travis Pastrana is under contract with Subaru with Vermont Sports Car, and they're gonna run him. So he's gonna, okay, I'm gonna get into the sport. I'm gonna team up with Travis. We're gonna have fun together. Group N Imprez WRX is really good product, a good car to develop. So they contact me and I say, I'm sorry guys, I already have a deal, but thanks anyway for reaching out. Anyway, long story short, my driver ends up having some personal issues, where he's not around anymore. I mean, he still is around, but he's not around, if you know what I mean. So I'm like, I call the team and say, oh, my deal doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. And they like, oh, he's doing the first event with another co-driver. If he doesn't work out, we'll let you know. Okay, all right, keep me posted. And anyway, he does the event with this co-driver, and it doesn't work out. So they called me the following day, and they're like, we can do the next event we do. If it works out, he'll carry on. Anyway, we do this event in Tennessee, and we had a really good event, before the turbo gave up, and we were second overall on only his third rally. And I'm sitting with him at Shakedown. That's the first time we were together. It's like, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows about weight transfer. He knows what he's doing with his left foot braking and everything, which all comes from his motocross background. So that's how the start of our relationship was. A working relationship that almost never happened for some strange reasons.
Did you almost find, because it sounds like he had the stuff from the early beginnings. Did you ever find yourself having to perhaps take the co-driver's role of pegging him back slightly to show his inexperience didn't get away with him, as it were?
Yeah, so that was entirely pretty much the first year together, because motocross riders, they almost feel invincible. They're some of the bravest people, when it comes to motorsport. And their sport is so tough. Then they get in a rally car with a roll cage around them, and they feel even more invincible. So it was a good year. It was a good year, 2005, with a Group N car, and there was a lot of, holding the reins back, and this driver that wanted to explore the limits and beyond. So yeah, the first year was like that. But then again, Ken was very smart as far as progression. And again, what we were talking about a few minutes ago, he was seeking to improve his experience, and we even went overseas. We did the New Zealand Rally Championship the following year just to gain experience. And you go to a place like New Zealand as a new driver, and you do the full championship there, you're going to get your ass kicked all year long by the local drivers that have 100% knowledge and understanding of what to do with those roads and with that camber, you're going to come back to America. We came back to America, we started winning rallies just by getting beat up so much in that championship. It was the best thing we could have done.
Fantastic. New Zealand must be a great place to compete.
Absolutely, yeah. It's hard to explain, guys. I can tell you, it's a fantastic place. The roads are amazing. But then you will go to New Zealand and drive those roads, and you were like, oh, this exceeds what Alex was trying to explain to us. It's something that needs to be tried. Yeah, and I recommend everybody to at least go do a rally or do an event, a spectator event, in New Zealand, because it's just the next level.
I mean, I know this is absolute nonsense, and of course it can't ever be that. But whenever I watch onboards from New Zealand, Rally New Zealand, it always makes it look deceptively simple. Those roads, the camber, the car just transfers easy peasy from one corner to the other. And of course, it's nothing like that. It's all the work in the world. But those roads are just incredible, mind-blowing.
Incredible. Yeah, that's the right way to describe it. And it does look simple, and it does get easier, but you got to do those first 4 or 5 events. And I'll tell you, the local drivers are tough, and they don't tell you much because they like to keep their secret. But because of the way the roads are designed in a way that you don't see anywhere else in the world, you drive them different compared to anything else in the world as far as stages go.
And you did your first snowdrift rally with Ken then the year after that, I think. So you've done the snowdrift before this, but the snowdrift is one that looks, I've seen plenty of footage from it and stuff. And what it has to, what I find really interesting with it is that you can't run proper snow tires. Am I right in saying that? They have a really interesting tire rule at snowdrift. So it's always a very compromised setup on that rally, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very difficult event because you're not allowed studded tires. You can only run standard tires without the studs. So when you have a situation where the stages are repeated and they go from snow, they turn into ice, and that doesn't work. It's an event that it's a great group of organizers. The roads would be beautiful if it was a summer event, but let's be honest, it's an event we dislike because of that. In those conditions and this level of grip, nothing works. Diffs don't work, dampers don't work, and everything. So it's an event that whoever sucks the least ends up winning every time, because there is no speed. There is just surviving. I haven't been there in a couple of years. I'd done a snow event, couple of snow events a few months ago, one in Canada and one in Finland, but there were studs allowed, and that's totally different. It's like you almost have more grip there on gravel. So snowdrift is an interesting event, and when I miss it every year, I don't mind missing it. I'm sorry.
The working relationship with Ken, I mean, it must have delivered some incredible, unique driving experiences. And the one that struck out to me looking at the EWRC profile was your early drive in the Mark II Escort, which, I mean, at the New York rally, which I can't get my head around as a concept anyway. It's presumably upstate somewhere. Yes. But what was it like? Presumably this was the Escort long before it became the Hoonigan car and the internet sensation it's now known as.
That's right. Yeah, we Ken always liked those cars, and he's got a few Irish friends, and one of them is a very good photographer from Boston, Irish. His name is Neil McDade. And Neil was always bugging Ken, oh, you need to get a Mark II Escort, you need to get a Mark II Escort. And Neil is someone that Ken has a lot of respect for Neil. And Neil sends him videos and things like that. Neil is the reason why we went and did Donegal a couple of years ago. Neil is the reason. So Neil, if you're listening, thanks for all that. So he purchased this Mark II Escort from UK, and we're trying to do a couple events. Do an event in Canada, doesn't work out. Then we go and do an event in Rally New York, and I think breaks well. We're 5th and 1st in class, and then we go and do the McRae stages 1 year. The year after Colin passed away, there was a local rental car. It wasn't our car. So, and now look, I'll tell you this: as you get older as a driver and drivers and co-drivers, they start appreciating more older and more classic cars. So when I competed, when you brought Rally New York 15 years ago, back then I didn't care. Oh, why are we in this car? We could be in a nice four-wheel drive with all the grip in the world. Now I think it's the best thing in the world. We did that rally a couple months ago with a classic Porsche, titled Porsche, and it was the best thing ever. So you develop an appreciation because you get older, and now the classic cars are cars that were new cars when you were a kid, so it's just interesting, and I love those cars. I love Mark II Escorts, I love 911s, and I hope to spend more time in it. And this Ken doesn't have the Mark II Escort anymore. Was sold at the end of this relationship with Ford, and now he's in the hands of a collector, actually a collector locally in Utah. So the car stayed local. But when we did that rally with a classic titled Porsche 911 at the end of the rally 2 months ago, Ken told me, I can't believe how fun this car is. I had a great time. As you know, we spend our weekends on $1 million World Rally car. You know what I mean? But then someone says that about a car that has got a standard gearbox, 2 rear-wheel drive only, and a primitive, everything. I still enjoy it. That's true passion for me.
Would this have been the classic East African Safari rally, presumably in a Tuttle Porsche?
That's right.
That must be an incredible event to tackle.
Yeah, that's another event, just like New Zealand, I said a minute ago. I can tell you how incredible it is, but it's something that one way or the other, as a team, photographer, media, or competitor, needs to be experienced firsthand. Because you think you know rally, and then you go to and do the safari, and you're like, at the end of the rally, you're like, no, I didn't know rally. There is still a lot more to come. It's just such an incredible experience. And after the event, I thought, before I write down some thoughts about the event, I'll take a couple of days and then write down some thoughts that may pay off if we go back to Kenya, tips and things like that. I couldn't do it after 2 days. I had to do it after 2 weeks because there was so much to process, so many thoughts to process, and so many points to remember that it took that long.
That's incredible, because you've done your first safari after competing for nearly 30 years now, and then to have that experience, it must have been like nearly your first rally all over again, just a complete eye opener.
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's one of those classics. You got the Monte Carlo, you got the Acropolis, you got the RAC, and then you got the Safari. These are the classic, the Grand Slam of events. Whenever you can put one of those in your CV, it's an amazing experience, and it creates not only motorsport memories, it creates life memories. So our sport is good because of that. That's how our sport is incredible. It creates life memories, not just sport memories.
Moving up to 2010, you guys moved from the Group N car into an open Fiesta, and also had some drives in a Focus WRC. What was the transition like, moving from competing in a Group N car into something as advanced and as modern as the next one?
It was a big deal, but the All Ford deal was a big deal. They come on board, big budget, and big plans and everything, and long-term commitment. That was a dream come true. Working 4 years with Subaru, working hard to improve, and obviously Ken discovers by accident this marketing opportunity, which is called Gymkhana, and it starts developing that, and it becomes not just something that looks good on video, but it becomes a very strong marketing plan that every sponsor or corporate name wants to be associated with. So the deal with Ford comes, and is a big deal, and we are doing the American Championship, and we're doing 7 rounds the first year of the World Championship and 9 rounds the second year, and then the focus switches to something else. But to us, was a dream come true. Personally, for me, it was a dream come true, because you're going and do the WRC with pretty much a factory team in a World Championship winning car like the Focus, and then you get to test and develop the new Fiesta. 10 years ago, the 1600 Fiesta WRC. So It was a massive progression in our career, learned a lot during those couple of years. It's really that step that moved us into the next level of growing as competitors.
Yes, I can imagine it must. I mean, you tackled some proper top tier events in that period as well. I mean, I imagine places like Finland, but for someone, you know, at least as steeped in rallying as yourself, that must have been a big deal.
Yes, and Finland was, I believe, the second year. The first year we did events like, you know, the first time we did Rally of Wales, around the World Championship. So it's hard to put a value on this sort of experience. And for me personally, I feel very privileged that, look, 10, 12 years ago, my experience and level of co-driving was nowhere near where it is now. So I really appreciate the fact that Ken and the sponsors and Ken's agent and management said, no, we are moving into the next level, and Alex is coming with, because that allowed me to continue my dream of progressing and becoming a top level co-driver. They could have easily said, let's hire a professional European, but they didn't. You know, they kept me on board. And even if there were, let's be honest, guys, there were some mistakes in those 2 years. You know what I mean? But I guess they understand, those guys, the true meaning of teamwork. You know, there is a, you know, you win together, you lose together, you crash together, you win together. You know, so that's something that I'm very grateful to them, to Ken, to the sponsors. I'll be forever grateful, because it allowed me to establish myself as a true professional co-driver. And it's been my only job, co-driving, for the past 12 years, which is quite a stint.
And that first year with the Ford deal, you know, you were back and forth to the American Championship and doing rounds of the World Rally Championship. How was that a struggle or hard to adapt to, going over and back doing these different events and different cars? How did you stay focused and stay on top of your game during all of that?
The fact that we were within the same group of people was a big help. The fact that we had to travel to Europe was a bit of a struggle. I remember speaking a few years ago with an international competitor like Hayden Paddon that tried his path in the World Championship. And he said to me, Alex, if you have to do it, you have to move to Europe. You can't just commute from New Zealand or from the US or from Australia, wherever you're from. And you have examples like him and Chris Atkinson that have moved from their own countries and lived in Europe to, you know, follow a program like that. So for us, look, we weren't doing the entire championship, but still 7 or 8 or 9 rounds of the WRC. It's a lot of events. So the struggle was the logistical side of having to travel. But the fact that I was working with the same driver and the same management, and we were all in the same plan, that made it easier. It's difficult when you do that and you're working with 2, 3, 4 different drivers, which I've done in the last few years. And every time you have to adapt to that, adapt to that different driver and the way he works and she works and the way they do things. In that case, it's even more difficult. But it was definitely a challenge. But if it wasn't challenging, we wouldn't have learned as much as we did.
Do you have any standout moments from those early years when you were contesting the WRC, you know, 2011, 2012, that kind of time?
Yeah, there is few standout moments, and it took us more events than we expected before we scored our first points, which ended up being in Spain. We were on route in Germany, and as well in Turkey earlier in the year. That didn't happen. So then we went to France on a wet rally in Alsace, and it was very, very difficult, you know, to drive those conditions when, you know, with those WRC tires and a car that basically was our second tarmac event. Then we eventually went to Spain, and we were able to seal our first WRC points. And you'll never forget that. You know, your first top 10 finish in WRC, even if it's just a top, even if it was a 9th place, you know, that there wasn't anything special. But you won't forget that. And then we had a good stint in Mexico. Okay, it's considered pretty much our home WRC events because it's the closest event to us. And we progressed every year that we've gone there, even after those years you mentioned, up to a 7th place, I think in 2013 or 2014. And the same thing with going to New Zealand and finishing in the top 10 and battling against people like, Manfred Stoll or Henning Solberg. So yes, they're not the top guys, but let's not forget, guys, where we came from. We came from US, which we have paid the price a little bit from the fact that the years he spent in the national championship here in the US, one pass recce, organizer provided notes, there was no opportunity to develop those pace notes. So we go to the WRC with those events, and we are just thrown into the fire. And some people sometimes are critical of Ken. Let me tell you that from my opinion of being next to him and as a rally enthusiast, he's done a bloody good job, because he comes from, remember the movie Cool Runnings, where the Jamaican team goes in. That's what America was with rallying, you know what I mean? It's just we were the Jamaican team rallying, So, and in my opinion, we did quite well, all things considered.
There's a Ken Block Cool Runnings Photoshop forming in my head already.
Those first WRC tarmac events must have been quite the baptism of fire out of all of those, surely, as both you and Ken, and previous to your time with Ken competing in the States, it's all loose surface or snow, to go a full fat asphalt WRC round, writing your own notes, you're in a WRC car. That must have surely been one of the most challenging ones to do, first of all, I'd imagine. Yes,
they were challenging, and tarmac is just, with those type of cars, with World Rally cars, tarmac is just next level. The speed you're traveling and the level, and then you're competing against specialists, the French drivers, and the drivers, the Italian drivers and things like that. But again, going back to the first question, I'm proud of the work Ken has done, like in a situation like tarmac events. I remember going to France on the second year and battling against this young French driver. He's in a Mini. His name is, I can't remember. But anyway, he's a FFSA supported driver. He's meant to be the next Sebastian Loeb. And we're battling, and, battling against Armindo Araujo with the Mini WRC as well, former, production world champion driver. And we're going there, and we're not only battling against them, we're beating them, So, and again, you have the American driver that comes from America, little experience on tarmac. We don't have tarmac round. We don't have tarmac rallying in America. So all his experience was done this first WRC events. I'm proud of the work is done. And but to answer your question, tarmac is my favorite surface, because I grew up in tarmac in the stages in Sicily. So all I did was tarmac when I rallied in Italy. The first gravel stage was here in America. So tarmac has a special place in my heart, and is my favorite surface. And I enjoy when we do tarmac events.
Just what I want to hear as an Irish person as well, actually. So, yeah.
In the years since, you seem to have divided your career between helping up and coming aspiring rally drivers and, of course, your commitments with Ken, driving ever faster and more modern WRC cars. Was that a conscious decision to help guide the careers of aspiring drivers?
It was a bit of a decision that I needed to do. In the mid of the last decade, Ford switches their plan to rallycross, as we all know. And Ken was very fair in advising me early enough, gave me the time to be proactive and look for other work. But he told me, Alex, look, I'll be gone for a couple of years. I'll be happy to have you back in the car when I'm back, but I have to be in rallycross tracks for the next couple of years. That's what my contract with Ford says. So at that point, I need to, roll your sleeve up and get to work and find, if that's what you want to do, find other opportunities. And I did. It's difficult though, guys. Let me tell you, it's very difficult. You're sitting with the same driver for 10 consecutive years. You know what that person is even thinking before the person opens their mouth. You know what I mean? The level of sync is so good. But anyway, I believe it's 2014, and I started working with other drivers in both, WRC and then Junior WRC, British Championship with Gus and all that. And that was, again, we're talking about steps of career. I thought I knew everything. You don't know anything until you start working with a different variety of drivers. Working with the same driver, that's the easy part. As soon as you start stepping with 3-4 different drivers in 5-6 different events, that's when you actually have to push your limits, because you're working with different characters, different system of pace notes, most likely different events and countries. So there was a next stepping stone in my career that helped me progress and become better.
And I mean, yeah, that was going to be my next question. Basically, I mean, it must be your travel schedule is pretty hectic, and then you're in with different guys, and it's not only different drivers, but you're competing in different classes, different championships, all sorts of different vehicles, which I think is probably what makes your career so interesting, is that you're ticking all the boxes all over the world in different sorts of cars. It must be, how do you reset, going from one driver to the next, or one championship to the next? It must be, as particularly coming out of that period with Ken, you're in that zone to then go, a totally different area. How do you kind of clear the head and say, I'm not with Ken now, I'm with this guy?
At first it was difficult, but then I tried to apply certain procedures before getting on a plane and going to do this event with this driver or that driver. And those procedures were simple, a little bit more homework, a little bit more of watching stages and a complete 100% understanding of the system of pace notes that I was going to go and work with next week or whenever the rally was. And like you said, there were events that were consecutive. I think at some point it was 5-6 weeks, New Zealand, France, America, back to New Zealand, back to France, all the time with a different driver. At first it was difficult. As soon as I worked with the right procedures to make my life easier, with that sort of change and the sort of inconsistency among drivers and cars and pace note systems, it made my life much easier. Up until a couple years ago, before Ken came back full time and I was still working with a variety of drivers, that became quite natural actually. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because I knew that I was learning a lot and I was improving a lot as a co-driver. Now Ken has come back, and my deal with Ken is that when I started a championship with him, is I need to consistently stay with him. But during the off season, I can do events with other drivers. That's why you see me doing the Rally in Canada and Rally in Finland with Kyle Tilley, because it was during the off season. But then I started working with Ken, and I'll be consistently with him all the way until October. And that's better, because let me tell you that between choosing a variety of drivers and one driver, always as a co-driver, you want to stick to the one driver because you have consistency there. And that's what makes your job easier, a little easier.
Presumably, as much as it's a challenge working with so many different drivers, it means that you have built up an incredible amount of experience over that time, and the need to sort of adapt to all the various drivers' different foibles and things like that.
Yes, for sure. That's invaluable. I learned much more in the last 5-6 years of working with a variety of drivers than I did in the previous 10 years working just with Ken. You get accustomed to what the driver wants. You get accustomed to what his system or notes are. It becomes it flows so easily. But when you have to be on your be on your toes and be mindful of, this is different from the rally I did last week with the other driver, with the other system of notes, and in that other slower car or faster car, that pushes your levels of it just makes you better. You can't put a price on that. And it's a suggestion I give to any young up and coming co-driver. Just work with different drivers. It's incredible how quicker the progression will be compared to sticking to one driver. I did that for 10 years because it was work, and it worked perfectly well. But when the need was there to go and look for other opportunities, at first I was worried, but at the end I was like happy I did it.
In that kind of time between you're working with different drivers when Ken was doing other things, there's an interesting vehicle pops up there, a Subaru Crosstrek. Not quite the traditional image of a rally car, although admittedly the American Championship always throws up a lot of non-traditional rally cars. The Lexus IS 350 is another one that springs to mind. Sounds great though. But the Crosstrek, that must be an interesting vehicle, presumably pretty modified as well, because it was an open class car.
The idea was really good, and it was the idea came from a former Canadian rally champion, Pat Richard, which is a very bright individual as well. And he had a couple of customers that were interested in getting into the sport, and they came up with this idea. Under the skin, the car was a proper open class Subaru WRX. It's just that the body, let's put it this way, the chassis was a Crosstrek chassis. I spent a full season doing the Canadian Championship and a couple of rounds of the American Championship and a lot of testing in that car. And I can tell you it was a brilliant chassis. I really liked it. Very honest chassis. It didn't suffer from any oversteer. It didn't have any particular flaws. It was a very neutral chassis. And I'll tell you this, to me, it's a better chassis than the hatchback WRX, which is a similar year. It reacted better, it worked better, but I think there was a lot of clever engineering done by the particular guy, Pat Richard, which owned Rocket Rally in Canada, when he developed those cars. So really enjoyed that car. Very powerful as any open class Subaru, with a very good and honest chassis.
And I can imagine, if nothing else, it must have been quite the contrast, or perhaps not so much of a contrast, considering how good it was, with the following year when you first got your hands on a new era WRC car, the Fiesta for Rally Spain. I can imagine that was quite a good weekend, or at least quite a momentous one.
Yes. The 2017 and up World Rally cars are arguably, I mean, they're probably the best cars that our sport has seen so far. I don't want to say it was a bit of a shock, because we did spend some time testing the car and everything. I mean, the testing was a bit of a shock. They're just amazing cars, and it was a big jump compared to that. I knew that time was coming. Ken has always liked those sort of vehicles and the top level of the World Rally cars that are running in the World Championship. So I knew we were going to try one at some point. It was an amazing experience. Unfortunately, it didn't end up as well as we wanted to, because we weren't quite used to the WRC tire, which is such a unique tire that unless you're driving in WRC and using them, you don't gain the experience. You lack the experience. So I'm glad we're back in a similar car this year, because it was fair for us. It was always it was meant to happen, to try that sort of car again. Although it's not a Ford, is a Hyundai i20, but happy to be in that car this year for sure.
And in 2018, you were in another Ford machine, the Escort. Cosworth made its return in its first guys before it came to be the way now. Presumably, you must be a pretty big Group A or a fan, given the year of rallying you came to be watching growing up in Italy. So that must have been quite a cool phone call to hear about when that came on scene, I imagine.
Absolutely, that was I can't believe how happy I was when that program, that idea came up and about, and like you just said, I was there when the Escort became the weapon to beat in World Championship and National Championships, because the old Group A cars, the Celica and the Lancia Delta were getting obsolete, and here comes Ford with this amazing product, which is a step ahead of everything by miles. So that car and obviously, as you know, we know the wild look of the car that was preceded by the Sierra, but they're so late 80s and early 90s, mid 90s, which is when we were kids pretty much, so that car has a special place in my heart. And the first version, was was a Group A version that unfortunately was carrying on some older parts. And let's be honest, we were driving the wheels off the thing, and it was breaking a lot. We had a podium in Oregon at the second round of the American Championship, and we were working on the car after every stage, try to drag it to service so the boys could fix it, all sort of problems, electrics, drive shafts, gearboxes. And managed to finish on the podium on that event. And then what happened? I think Ken had some commitments. So yeah, we weren't back until New England Forest Rally, which unfortunately is when we lost the car. Again, a mechanical issue, the gearbox seizes in the middle of the corner, false neutral, sensors on the inside of the corner and then on the roof, and it catches on fire. And that's one of the hardest time of my career, losing a rally car completely, especially a rally car that has got an historic presence and body like that one. Was just heartbreaking. It took weeks to recover. We was like, like when you lose your dog, we were devastated. But the good news was that there was a plan for a second one coming, and it was bigger and better. So,
did you ever find that there's a difference in how that Escort, called the Escort Cosworths, are viewed depending on whether you're in Europe or America? Because in America, it's not a car that presumably many Americans have any concept of, because it was never sold over there. There was no need to, and presumably whenever it's in Europe, it's instantly recognizable as a cult hero.
Yeah, that's very true. There was the impressions when we had the car here in America racing was mixed, because you had a lot of curiosity from people that didn't realize what the car was, and they saw this thing that was smaller than normal American cars, so they were getting a feeling that it was something from overseas. And then you had the true enthusiasts that they couldn't believe their eyes. Seriously, I remember being at ceremonial starts and people walking and stopping on the tracks like, what is this thing doing here? And there have been Escort Cosworths competing here in the last 20 years. Random ones, one, two here and there. But that one had a special livery that was quite attractive, and obviously carried Ken's name on the doors, so people knew who the driver was, and there was quite a reaction either way. Yeah, so it was good to see that.
And of course, the car came back in a completely different sort of scenario then, wild, very wild, and maybe kind of controversial even at the time to some of the fans, almost in some ways. But what a return to rallying that was.
Yeah, that obviously my driver never do things halfway, so he had to finish what he started. So he came back with a bigger and better Cosi. And it was controversial, but there was, I think the idea was good, at least maybe because I know how good the car was from being inside the car. It was a wild idea, but the car worked well because he had modern parts. So we could focus on driving it and testing it and driving it without having to be gentle with it. I believe he still has a car. I don't think he'll sell it. It's one of the cars that he's going to keep from the Ford collection. But I think he's got an R5 gearbox. And then he's got modern dampers. The engine is the same, but then he's got a completely modern wiring loom. So we were never chasing the electrical gremlins or ECU gremlins that we had with I remember the first one had some diff controls that were like straight from the Carlos Sainz era, driving those cars. It's just amazing. And they were always, giving me an error and I had to reset them and everything. This one was just a normal, modern car with an old skin on the outside. Brilliant car on tarmac. I know we went to Donegal, we got our ass kicked, but Donegal, for a couple of reasons, Donegal is a very different event because it's such a bumpy event. But the test and the development that we did on the dampers and the understanding of the tires that we did at Donegal paid off for the following events, because we went to Italy and won the event there. Then we went to Switzerland and had a good showing there as well. Then we're back to Italy with the same car and won again. So again, there was the same case of what happened 15 years almost earlier, going to New Zealand, getting your ass kicked and learning from it. Going to Donegal, getting your ass kicked, learning from it, developing the car, and going and doing well the following year and a half. So that paid off well.
I mean, I've got to thank you for your part in bringing it back, to be honest, because it's so great to see an Escort Cosworth like that being driven properly, like the clappers, as if it's 1996 or whatever. You know, it's a proper throwback and one that the world's a lot better for.
And sorry, you mentioned before that it created some controversy, and I understand that. There is some purists that don't like that car. And there is a small part of me that says that maybe those cars shouldn't be molested, should be left alone. But at the end of the day, the fans loved it. The sponsors loved it. The old Cozy World, who was such a great idea, we generated so many views and so many happy fans. And that's what matters at the end of the day. Ken loves to drive that car. There is a reason why that car is still in the shed and he hasn't sold it. Because, you know, maybe one day, 5, 7, 10 years from now, we'll pull it out of the shed, dust it, and go do some events somewhere around the world. And it's a really enjoyable car to drive.
I mean, driving it at Rally Legend particularly must have been quite the experience.
Yes. It was the experience, and it was a bit of a strange experience because, you know, you go to Legend to put on a show, and then you are in a class with a bunch of drivers that the first thing that they've been dreaming about is to beat Ken Block. You know, so we're finding ourselves at Rally Legend, not putting on a show. We're finishing 10-kilometer stages. We're a second apart, and Ken is like, I don't want to be beaten by these guys. And those guys are looking at Ken, I'm going to get you. So we had to like put the show aside and drive that car as fast as we could and stay clean and neat. And some of the fans were like, why aren't you doing donuts at the roundabouts and everything? Because we don't want to get beaten by the local drivers who are bloody fast with their cars in their own stages. And we don't want to finish seconds. We want to win this thing. So there was a bit of a discussion there. But we know the story, and I'll tell you, that car was driven 100% for both those events, every single stage. And there were only a couple of stages that allowed us to win, that put a bit of a gap. But when you look how much we won those events for, it was a handful of seconds, really.
I was at the 2019 event, and I must say it was great to watch. And it's one of my favorite trips to do. I mean, for any rally fan, it's really
I agree with you, because the rules are so open. I mean, we were allowed to run side open exhausts in that event, nowhere else in the world. And that brings back, you remember the old Sierras and with this exhaust under the door. I remember being, 20 years old and going watch rallies, and Franco Cunico is going by with the Sierra and the flames are coming by. So it's great that there is still events in the world that allow something like that. Because our sport is changing. And we don't want it to become too lame. Electric is going to come. Hybrid is already here. Carbs and open exhausts are still pretty cool. We don't want to forget those.
The symphony of sounds, in particular on Rally Legend, really is. I think that sitting in the mountains with the sun's going down, and there's a Stratos going past, and then you guys go past or whatever. It's an incredible event. I just dug out this photo of where you nearly took out our GoPro camera on the event as well. But it's a great event, and it's good to see. It gives people a chance to see cars. And as you said, there was controversy about that Escort, but the fact remains that it enabled that car to be out and be seen and be driven around the world rather than not be competing at all, which ultimately is better than leaving it as it was. I think, which is what's important.
I agree.
I almost worry that an event like, I've never been. I need to get my ass in gear and get to Rally Legend. But I worry that there's almost like a time limit on how long it can continue going in its current form. Even somewhere as petrol obsessed and wonderfully so as Italy, the ever encroaching world of professionalism and increased safety, and already Rally Legend looks to be a complete anomaly compared to similar events you get in the UK. It's wild by the looks of things.
It's very true. I worry about that myself. And when we think sometimes how bonkers our sport is, you're like, our sport still exists nowadays. It's just a bunch of lunatics flying on a forest road, like that shouldn't be legal. That's what I tell people, it shouldn't be legal. But it'd be interesting to see how 10 years from now our sport looks like. I hope we're wrong, and I hope things are still, but I'm a little worried. Yeah.
And moving forward again, the Escort was retired for a while, and you guys then were back in oddly enough, Skoda Fabia R5.
Yes, obviously the deal with Ford is gone. It's lasted I think 10 years, which in motorsport term, 10 years is like 100 years. That was a very long stint. And we're very grateful to Ford for the support over the years. So then Ken has a brand new deal with Audi, which many don't know, but the deal with Audi is strictly EVs, electric vehicles, and Gymkhana. So Ken all of a sudden finds himself with the freedom of rallying whatever he wants. And the start of last year is the perfect example. We started and we tried a car like the Fabia R5, which is actually, it's an R5 plus. I don't know if Barry McKenna still has that class. He has a 2-liter motor. So in my opinion, that's the best combination for a rally car. It should be the top class in WRC right now. R5 cars, which are sort of like have a cost cap. They don't cost as much as a modern World Rally car, let alone a World Rally car with a hybrid system, but put a bigger motor in it and maybe just bump up the aero a little bit. I remember last year we were running the Fabia WRC wing in the back to create a little bit of downforce, but that's not an expensive car. You know what I mean? That reminds me a little bit of what the Group A's were when we got out of the Group E era. And there were a lot of Group A's, and the fields had so many cars. Early Group A was very, very popular. Anyway, we get into the car and we do a beautiful car. That chassis in the Fabia is the reason why the chassis and the reliability and how strong that car is the reason why that car has been successful for years. Very strong car. The chassis is fantastic. And we do one event, but then a deal with Subaru comes along. So we only did one event with the Fabia. Really enjoyed it. Nearly won the rally, but wasn't meant to be. But missed the car.
And so, looking ahead to the near future, how do you see your continued career progressing?
It's a good question. I like to, if I stay fit and I stay, healthy, I'd like to do another 10 years. But it's always difficult in our sport, because you just never know. It's not just in your hands. It depends what happens with the world, with the economy. Right now, it's a good time, especially here in North America. There is a lot of cash flowing around. There is sponsors, there is, things are good, but not just here. I mean, we just had the last round of the Australian Championship. It's quite healthy there. Rallying in general seems healthy around the world. So I like to do another 10 years, and I'll be continuing working with Ken as much as we can. The positive thing is Ken has got a young daughter, 15 years old, Leah, that just started rallying. So that's good for all of us involved with owning and racing, because it means that Leah is probably going to rally for few years, and Ken is going to follow along. It's become a bit of a family affair where mom, dad, and daughter are rallying the American Championship. So it's good for us. And then after that, there is another son, that is very much into motorsports. So I feel that the blocks will be involved in rallying one way or the other for a long time. They understand the rally is a sport that is so good for up and coming people. It's a sport that teaches you true grit, that creates real men and women, teaches you the hard, times, and how to deal with adversities and things like that. No other motorsport in the world is as tough as rallying. So if I had the money, I would put that kid into rallying for sure, because they're gonna become, real men and women. You know what I mean? So that's where we are at this point. I like to still work with other drivers, and obviously Rhiannon and I, we have the rally school that has been extremely busy. So until the sport is this healthy, I'll be around. Every year I say to myself, maybe it's the time. It's been nearly 30 years, guys. Maybe it's time to hang the helmet. I say that to myself. I don't tell anyone. Then a couple of weeks go by, and I'm like, okay, when is the next rally? Until that still happens, that'll be the fuel, the fire that takes me every year to renew the license, and get going again. The day I feel like, what, I have had enough, then it'll be time to hang the helmet.
But looking forward for the rest of this year, presumably it's going to be finished doing the American Championship in the I-20. Is that the continued plan for now?
Yes, we're committed. We're committed. We're committed to finish the championship and finish it well. I have a feeling that the rules in the American Championship may change in the next 12 to 18 months. So you may not be able to see those cars like, the one we're running, the one that Barry McKenna or the Subarus are running. It's just a feeling, I'm sure we'll hear from the sanctioning body in the next few months in preparation for the future. But if that's the case, it means the American Championship may eventually switch to what the other national championships around the world are, which is R5 machinery. So it's a great opportunity this year to enjoy, both as competitors and as fans, enthusiasts and everything, this type of cars here, and they may not last. So definitely committed for the future, for the year. We'll see what happens. We'll put our best effort, try to win this championship. And it's a long season. It's tough here in America. There is, I think, 7 more rounds left, which usually a national championship is made of 6 or 7 rounds. We already done 2. So, yeah.
And that I-20, although, on the skin of it, it's an I-20 WRC, but it's not quite the same as what it was. Can you run us through maybe some of the changes that have been made to that car to enable it to compete?
Well, this is a fairly new deal for us, and the car was so late around Rigawood. And the team is run by the car is run by a French team, which is 2C competition, which ran Lube and Solberg last year. So we actually I haven't had the time to investigate much about it. I know we're running a smaller motor compared to the Subarus and to Barry to make up for the fact that we're using a paddle shifter. So they're running 2 liters and we're running 1600 in our motor. And as far as aeros, there has always been a bit of a gray area because, there was some issues last year that were brought up by some competitors before we brought this car. But I see that now it's almost drive what you bring as far as the aerodynamics go. So we have obviously finished the first rally and the car was compliant to, and the top 4 cars were compliant to the post-event scrutineering. So there is no issues there. I think it's going to be a nice battle this year and between the Subarus, Barry and us, and may the best win. I'm really enjoying being in the car. It's only been 1 event and a small test. It's a fantastic car, and the team is doing an amazing job running it. We have a very good engineer this year working with us. That is very smart, and he's giving us options as far as setup and as far as what to do with tires and dampers. We have a good comprehensive test plan for next week. So we're putting all the effort, our sponsors are putting the budget in order to do the job right. And Ken and I are committed to do the best that we can this year.
Wonderful stuff. I'm conscious of taking up too much of your valuable time, but by way of sign-off questions, if I'm sure we all agree that the Group A era was rallying at its best. And if you could have co-driven for any Group A or 2-litre WRC driver back in the day, who would it have been?
It's a great question.
Would it be a Kuniko or?
I think it would be Miki Biasion, because what I always liked about Miki, there was an incredible driver, but also such a nice attitude and character. You won't see a picture of Miki around, with him not smiling. I read a book about him, a few years back, and it's such a great story. Is the true story of a driver that didn't really come from money, but made it to the top of the sport, 2 times world champion. And it's a really good story. And I really like Miki. I had the opportunity to meet him, a rally legend, for those couple of years. And he's as good as character as he looks as a character on the outside. So yeah, probably that will be him. But there is so many good drivers in our sport, and so there is so many underrated drivers that could have deserved a better opportunity, that the list will be so long.
Wonderful stuff.
Well, I think, as Jamie said, we won't take up too much more of your valuable time, Alex. So thanks very much for coming on and chatting to us. It's been really fun. You've been very insightful, and you've shared some great stories with us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. And yeah, looking forward to follow your show in the future, and yeah, hopefully we get the opportunity to chat again in the future, maybe at the end of the year.
Let's hope so. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
That concludes episode 6 of Rally DNA. Stay tuned for another episode coming soon, featuring another member of the Hoonigan Racing team. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thank you.